What do you make of this? A farmer planted seed, and as he scattered the seed, some of it fell on the road and was eaten by the birds. Some fell into the gravel and sprouted quickly, but didn't put down roots, so when the sun came up, it withered just as quickly. Some fell into the weeds, and as it came up, it was strangled by the weeds. But still some fell onto good earth and produced a harvest beyond his wildest dreams. Are you listening? Really listening? My wife and I, we planted some tomato seeds, and we were really excited about this. So we put them in a pot right outside of our house, and we gave it everything we had. We watered it, we nurtured it, we took care of it. But we quickly realized that nothing was happening. So we continued to love on it, and finally a little bit of green began to emerge from the pot. And we got really excited, but only to realize that it was just grass. And so, out of frustration and anger, we simply just cast it aside and we threw it into a barren strip of side yard. And we were really frustrated about it, but we just let it alone. But what is it that makes good soil? What is it that the soil is open to awakening the life within the seed? I mean, what is so special about this that brings new life? As I tell this story, we often think of ourselves as the farmer or as the seed. But what if, in this context, what if we're the soil? What if we're the ones that are open and receptive to new life beginning in our midst? What if we're the ones who are meant to notice new life awakening around us? What if mission is actually more about cultivating, receiving, transforming, and tending than it is tossing a seed not sure where it will land? For me, gardening has become an incredible spiritual practice. I've learned that to be a good gardener, you really have to know and take care of your soil. You also can't hurry up the process. To get to a harvest, there are no shortcuts. You can't bypass it. You've got to go through the cycles and the rhythms of life to get to that point. It also has taught me a lot about congregational life. One thing I've learned is that in congregational life, you have to till the soil, you have to cultivate the soil, you have to turn it over. You got to grab the clods and break them apart. You have to remove root systems from old weeds that threaten to choke out life. You have to be willing to disrupt the soil so that new life might emerge. This is the same in congregational life. We have to be willing to disrupt the soil. Encounter with God and the Holy Spirit can cause disruption. It can be uncomfortable, it can be chaotic, but it can also be transforming. It can lead to new life in new ways when we aerate the soil and allow oxygen to breathe in new life in that soil and to those seeds. The second phase of this is planting, and I've learned a lot about planting. It's not just casting a seed into the ground, but it's actually about learning about the different context of these seeds, learning about what seeds need what light and what seeds need the proper amount of nitrogen and oxygen. What is the seed's context and where can we put it so that it might thrive most fully? This is the act of investing in relationships and abandoning a one-size-fits-all approach. What we're talking about is getting to know the context of our communities and the composition of our neighborhoods. Are we paying attention to both soil and seed? But then it's time to wait. Are we willing to relinquish control and trust that in our waiting, life is happening, life is becoming? There's only so much we can do before we must trust the mystery at work, knowing that in the darkness of the soil, life is forming in ways that we cannot know or see. In our congregation, are we waiting expectantly? Are we willing to relinquish control of our own agendas? Are we searching for new ways of doing things? And are we willing to wait and to trust in what is unseen? And then we get to tending. It's the hard daily practices of getting down on our knees, pulling weeds, watering the plants, and making sure sure that life is becoming. It's about being with life as it's cultivated and becoming new. But it's a practice that never ends. It's day in and day out. We consistently make sure that life is thriving among us and around us. What practices are we engaging in that help us sense the presence of the Holy sustaining what is growing within and around us? In our congregation, what is necessary for tending the growth we now see? And are we paying attention to what is still needed? And are we willing to put in the effort to sustain what is coming alive among us? And then we get to the harvest, a time for us to revel in the joy of new life, the life that has been cultivated, the life that we have tended, that we've nurtured and sustained. It's life that's exciting. It calls us to celebrate, to rejoice in what is going on. Is our congregation pausing to recognize when life has thrived? Are we feasting on God's presence abundant with us? Are we aware of it? Are we present with it? Do we recognize and see that new life within and around us? And then we come to something that I try to skip all the time. I try to bypass it as often as I can. But rest is important for the soil. Rest is when we renew the soil, when we let the nutrients come back so that life might be sustained again. In fact, it's a biblical imperative. It's a sign of wise earth stewardship. We need the same thing in our spiritual lives. We need Sabbath and time with God. Are we allowing ourselves to rest into God's presence, to hear the voice that God speaks in the silence, to allow our own discernment to renew and refresh us for whatever is next? So this is where we finally find ourselves. The soil is renewed, then cultivated, and the cycle begins again. But this cycle I've discovered is really about the growth in missional practice. We walk the neighborhood, we dwell in the Word, we share in the round, we take the risk to encounter this new God, this new form that turns over the compacted and settled soil of congregational life. And so my wife and I came home one Sunday from church to notice this bare strip of side yard where we had cast aside these tomato plants. And we began to notice that new life was thriving, that something new was happening. See, we didn't realize that the type of tomato plant we planted, it needed a longer time of gestation. It needed more patience. So we cast it aside and we didn't really pay attention to its needs. We didn't see the possibility that was happening. We didn't see the new life that was coming into being. And there it was. So what do you make of this? A farmer planted some seed. He scattered the seed, and some of it fell into the road and the birds ate it. Some of it fell into gravel, and it sprouted quickly, but it didn't put down roots, so when the sun came up, it withered just as quickly. Some fell into the weeds, and as it came up, it was strangled by the weeds, and some fell on good earth. And a harvest bigger than his wildest dreams came. Are you listening to this? Really listening?